add a few. I know we have a few users. Oh, no, Rose, I have your own custom. I can pass out. Anyone? Our chefs. Does Mary have anyone? We have 3 left. Okay.
You just take them off.
Pastor, I also I took my brother
Oh, yes, and your brother is.
to the emergency room Monday. He has pneumonia in his lower left lung, and they kept him overnight. So that was Monday night. And then they kept him again last night, and then he called today and said they're going to keep him till at least Friday.
Wow.
So.
Okay, so Biff. Yeah. Does he have another name besides Biff?
Nope. For the first 5 years of his schooling, at the start of every school year, they called my mom and dad and said, "We need his official name." They said, "It's Biff."
It is Biff, okay.
He was named, do you know the story? No. I've told this before to some people. When mother and father were going together, my dad got my mom this little Pomeranian named Biff.
Do we really want to know that story?
When they were married and had their first boy, that was a possibility. But at the same time, they thought, well, maybe we'll only have one boy, so they named me after my dad. And the second boy got the dog's name.
You lorded that over your brother forever.
Every chance I get. So his name is Biff Anthony Bummer.
We can talk. Joe's whole name was Suzanne, and we have 50 Suzanne before her.
Now, was that Bill or Steve that was in church about a month ago? Yes, it was. Who came back from North Carolina? That was Ron. Was that a brother of yours? Yeah.
That's Rod. That's my brother Rod. He's my youngest brother. Rodney.
Is Steve not your brother?
He's my cousin.
He's Ron's brother.
Yes. There's Steve, then Ron, then there's the younger one, Doug. Steve, Ron, and Doug. They have 3 of them.
Oh, my church.
Oh, we're in the wrong.
That was Robert.
Well, if you friend me on Facebook, I'm able to
It's
find.
a decent one, thank you. Could have been worse, yeah. I'm happy with that one.
Well, good.
And it says what happens to.
I almost got put up your cats. I almost put them, but then I thought, no, I found this. So, yeah, so thanks to you two for supper.
Thank you.
Very much. Where was it we used to go where you had to do just this so that you weren't too noisy? I don't remember whether that was.
We used to do that like back in the 50s and 60s at the coffee house.
Yeah, that was a hip thing, but no, it was a way.
You're in church,
So,
You can apologize on your behalf of people.
Remember to take your weights down, I'll be here.
This group is is pretty much settled in together, and that's so just so all those no missing out and stuff. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving because I know we have some people have little ones that have to get home, so we got to keep moving. And we have progressed through this series about by faith, and you guys knew through the stuff that was coming that eventually we would look at enduring the cross. Jesus became the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Pioneer it's sometimes published or translated as author. Sometimes it's simply translated as beginner, the beginning and the end. Perfecter means the fullness of. So so how does the way of the cross define our faith? And we're going to spend time with that today. And so that's the end of our series, and it makes sense. We head off into Passion Story on Sunday, and so that's where we are. We begin lighting our candles, which I think many of you already have done. It's interesting how picture immediately you want to do. Okay, so we're ready for our opening dialogue. If you're at home and you are on our emailing list, you will have a bulletin that will help you, because I know you can't see the screen very well. So, but let's go and read together then our opening dialogue. Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets.
But in these last days, God has spoken to us by the Son.
He is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being. And he sustains all things by his powerful word. Since we have confidence by the new and living way opened for us by Jesus, let us approach with a true heart in full assurance of faith. We're going to sing together a hymn many of us know. I have a simple piano. So I hope you all know this. We know this one, right? My faith looks up to thee, thou Lamb of Calvary, Savior divine. Now hear me while I pray, take all my guilt away. Oh, let me from this day be wholly thine. May thy rich grace impart strength to my fainting heart, my zeal inspire. As thou hast died for me, oh, make my love to thee pure and changeless be a living fire. While life's dark ways I tread, and griefs around me spread, be thou my guide. In darkness turn to day, wipe sorrow's tears away. Nor let me ever stray from thee aside. When its life's transient dream, when death's full solemn stream shall o'er me roll, blessed Savior, there and now, fear and mistrust remove. Oh, bear me safe upon a ransomed soul. All right. This reading, today we advance on to the 12th chapter of Hebrews. It's very short, just verses 1 and 2. Anyone interested in being our reader for that today? She's interested in it.
That's wonderful, Stephen. Let's give it a
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Linda. You have a nice, strong voice too.
That's fine. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witness, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God.
All right. So.
If you tried to describe what God is like,
Can we
it can be difficult or daunting. But when the people who wrote the Bible pondered the mystery of God,
responding there. No, that's okay. So we're going to do, that's our passage, and we're going to do some exercises around this then as we kind of try to grab a hold of this particular theme today. And one of the things, I found this to be helpful. I had found it for an earlier week. And it talks about some background that's in that Old Testament and carries then into New Testament about God's faithfulness. And I think, this passage emphasizes Jesus is the pioneer and perfecter. So, of course, our faith is always flowing out to us from God. And I thought this was helpful as we wrap up this series. And then as we go into today's looking at that passion story. So now we're ready. I think you're taking it back. Look how good you are.
if you tried to describe what God is like, it can be difficult or daunting. But when the people who wrote the Bible pondered the mystery of God, they consistently described God's character in this way: compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. We're going to look at this last characteristic of God. It's the Hebrew word emet, which can be translated as faithfulness or even truth. It's related to another word you've probably heard before, amen, which is an untranslated Hebrew expression meaning that's truth. So emet can mean truth, and it can refer to correct ideas or concepts. This is because emet has to do with stability and reliability, like when Moses holds up his hands for hours to defeat Israel's enemies, the Amalekites. His friends put a rock under him and support his hands so that his hands will remain emet, or steady. When emet is used of people, it describes reliable and stable character or trustworthiness. Like when Moses appoints leaders in Israel, they're to be people of emet, people who are trustworthy, who won't take bribes or distort justice. So to say that God is full of emet doesn't just mean that God tells the truth or stands for truth. It means that God is faithful and trustworthy. This is why Moses calls God a rock, saying that he's faithful, just, and upright. He's saying that he can trust God to be consistent to his character. And the Hebrew word for trust is actually the verb form of the word emet. It's he'emin. It can be translated as to believe or to have faith, but most basically it means to consider someone trustworthy or to trust. The first person we meet in the Bible who considers God to be trustworthy is Abraham. God makes a promise that Abraham and his wife Sarah will have a huge family and that through them, all nations will experience God's blessing. But Abraham and Sarah are really, really old, and they've never been able to have any children. And yet, in the face of these challenges, Abraham means God. He considers God trustworthy to open a way forward. And God does show emet to Abraham and Sarah. In just 4 generations, their descendants form a whole nation called Israel. And God invites Israel into a trusting and faithful relationship. And when God leads them out of slavery in Egypt, Israel means in God. They trust and rely on him. But when they come to the land God promised to Abraham, and they find out it's filled with giant cities protected by giants, their trust in God's emet fails. But eventually we meet an Israelite who does trust God in the face of giants. It's David. He yells at the giant, "You come with a sword and a spear, but I come with the name of the God of Israel." David consistently relies on God. In fact, it said that David walked in emet before God. So David considers God to be faithful and responds with faithfulness. This is why God promises to raise up a faithful descendant of David, whose kingdom will endure forever, or in Hebrew, have emet. This faithful king will become the source of trust and stability for others forever. But when the kingdom later collapses, the Israelites find themselves without a home and without a king. And they cry out, "Oh God, where is your loyal love that you swore to David in your emet?" They're accusing God of abandoning his promises to Abraham and to David. Is God trustworthy? Is he faithful after all? The first line of the New Testament is an answer to that question. This is the lineage of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. In other words, through Jesus, God fulfills his promises. Or as Paul says, Jesus came on behalf of God's faithfulness. He is the faithful king whose kingdom will endure forever and who invites all nations to trust God. Now, trusting anyone is risky. It's hard to know if anyone is really full of emet. But the biblical story portrays a God who's been faithful all along and whose promises were fulfilled in the story of Jesus. And so as we look out at the obstacles facing us and our world, we're invited to take that same risk and join Abraham, David, and the people of God in trusting that God is overflowing with faithfulness.
I thought that was a good perspective on God's faithfulness, and we've especially seen that as we went through all those Old Testament stories, and then we looked at how the people responded in faith, but it was always initiated. So Hebrews now tells us in the end, as you know, in the end, the faithfulness of God is fully expressed in this Jesus. And it becomes embodied for all of us to know and see. And so Hebrews, in the end, highlights 3 actions where Jesus showed his faithfulness. And that's in, I need to refer you, it's in the 2nd verse. Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despised the shame or scorned the shame. I had to fuss with that one, so we will look at that a little. And is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. All right. So those are the 3 ways Jesus is expressing his faith. So if we look at enduring the cross, we look at the part of that passion story where we see Jesus enter into just the physical endurance of what happens to him. You know, he is kept from having food. He is when he's been praying and he's sweating blood, then he moves directly into his arrest. There's those traumas that his body is going through. So he's enduring the suffering that's going on. So that's one of the things we want to look. And I had a harder time than looking at scorning the shame. And one of the ways that in the end, after studying about, you know, what would be considered the shame, and that was the shaming Jesus went through as the passion story goes on. You know, the spitting on, the mocking and saying, you said you were this, but you're not this. If you say this, why aren't you saving yourself? So there's this constant shaming that is happening for Jesus. And yet Jesus continues forward and does not believe what he is being told he is. And that is another way that Jesus shows his faithfulness. I'm going to trust that what God said about me is true, despite all the shaming that is going on around me. I don't think we investigate that so much. The last one is sitting at the right hand of God the Father. There is in that passion story, as told by all those gospel writers, those hints that this is the place where Jesus is now doing God's work. This is God's plan. And now Jesus will be our access to God. The one who sits at the right hand is the advisor, and the one that is at one with the ruler. And we have access to who that is. So those are some things that Hebrews say to look for in Jesus' faithfulness. So we're going to get into, let's look at our next, we're going to do, we might not be able to do 4, or we might. The Passion story is told, as we know, by 4 different Gospels. They often say Mark's just a Passion story with a little bit of an introduction because it's so short and that's so central. So let's see if we can have some people focused on each of those tellings. I'm not going to make you read it all through. I'm hoping you are mostly familiar, but I want you to look through your passage and look for, we'll look at, the questions are in the printed things, but we'll look for some clues to some questions. So let's have, if you want to work how about you guys seem to work in a partnership? Michael, could you find a partner? And let's have this group of 3.
We can be a partner.
I think why don't Ray and Michael work on, you guys are, okay? And someone is calling us. Okay, so what, you guys are going to be Matthew. You guys will be Mark. And you guys will be Luke. And over here, you guys will be John. Okay. Oh, I have one little thing because we're gonna flip the slide. So here it is for you. If you lose track of where I'm going. There's your cheat sheet about where your passion story is in your gospel. So you kind of know, hey, there's our parameters. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We're John.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have Rose, we're gonna flip to the next slide.
Well, Clara, but 66 is the end of the chapter. It goes from this whole page to it ends right here. I'll turn to you. It ends right there. I think we just wrap ourselves and then discuss when we're done reading. Is that okay? Yeah.
Okay, there's so much there. I'm gonna guide you a bit. Okay, so Jesus endured the cross. So what examples from the Passion narrative you have demonstrate that Jesus is enduring and being the pioneer and perfecter of endurance? And then Jesus was treated like a nobody by the onlookers. What examples from your particular narrative show that Jesus maintains his identity of Son of God despite the shaming actions of those around him? How is Jesus the pioneer and perfecter of trusting that we are fearfully and wonderfully made and that God has claimed us and made us? The last one, Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father. You're starting to see in your passage that Jesus will be the mediator or the connecting link between the Creator and the created, God the Father and the creatures that the God the Father has made. And on the world's behalf, through the details in your Passion narrative. So, I really worked hard on how I wanted to express that, because we are doing more theological talk than we normally do.
That's great. That's what we need.
Yeah. So start looking for, do the easy one, examples of endurance. And then examples that Jesus stands up to those who want to shame him and discount his message.
Are we supposed to just speak up? How do you want us to do this? Are we waiting to the end?
Well,
Take some
I
time
can't answer
preparing.
anything until I read all this to myself. I mean,
Yeah, go ahead and start, go ahead and start skimming.
pages here. Oh, I'm not.
All professional.
Some of us are not Bible knowledgeable like others.
No, I just read it.
We'll take our time. We'll take our time. It's important enough. Michael, why don't you open your Bible too?
So,
That's 3 times. That's, yeah, that was,
so,
He didn't ball them out, I guess, the third time, just,
that was his endurance.
yeah, he's doing there, they're ignoring him.
he enjoys despite the fact that there's this is don't let them do the work for you.
He came the third time.
I'm not
he said, "Yeah,
going
I'll just come."
He's doing it for me.
So it's a mom thing. Can I give you another hint? If you if you have adults in your group, have one person start at the end and have one person start at the beginning. And you'll cover more ground. Yeah. Work as a team.
I don't read backwards.
No, but you can say, I'll take the final section or I'll take the final whatever. Yeah. You tell your group what to do, Miriam. They need your teaching.
I can't tell another teacher. That won't work.
So what examples can you use in Barabbas?
Yeah.
The soldier's marching. That's endurance.
So an example, we despise the changes in my company norms, so the ordinance.
So the endurance is physical.
Six.
So what are we looking for?